You stand before the screen, fingers frozen above the keyboard. The deadline presses against your chest like a weight. Every thought collides with another. Every word you try to form feels wrong before it reaches your hands. You've prepared. You've practiced. You've done everything right. And yet your mind refuses to cooperate. There's a tension in your shoulders you didn't notice until now. Your breath is shallow. The harder you focus, the more scattered you become. This is the paradox of effort. The very force you apply to break through resistance becomes the resistance itself. And somewhere, deep in the machinery of your mind, something fundamental has been misunderstood. There was once a student of movement who could not move, not physically. His body was capable, strong even, trained through years of discipline. But when it mattered most, when the moment demanded precision, his mind would seize. He had studied technique, practiced forms until they lived in his muscles, repeated sequences so many times they should have been automatic. But in the arena, under pressure, under the eyes of those who watched, his body would betray him. Not through weakness, through force. He tried harder, pushed deeper, commanded his limbs to obey with an iron will, and the more he pushed, the more rigid he became. His movements, once fluid in the training hall, turned mechanical, stiff, predictable. He was fighting himself. Every muscle activated when it shouldn't. Every breath held when it needed to flow. His mind screaming instructions his body couldn't process fast enough. This wasn't a failure of strength. It was a failure of understanding. In the old texts, there's a passage about water. Water doesn't resist the rock. It doesn't meet hardness with hardness. It flows around, through, over. When water is trapped, it doesn't push against the walls of its container. It finds the lowest point. It waits. And when the opening comes, it moves. The student had read these words, appreciated their poetry. But poetry doesn't save you when your mind is locked in a grip you can't release. He wanted to flow. He wanted ease. But wanting itself became another form of tension. The turning point came not in a moment of victory. It came in exhaustion. After another failed attempt, another performance where his body refused to listen, he simply stopped. Not in surrender. Not in defeat. He stopped trying to force the outcome. And in that stopping, something shifted. His breath, which had been trapped high in his chest, dropped lower, deepened. His shoulders, which had been pulled tight like drawn bowstrings, released. He noticed his jaw had been clenched. He let it soften. And then, almost as an afterthought, he moved. Not with the commanding force he'd always used, not with the grinding determination that had defined every previous attempt. He moved as if the movement was already happening, and he was simply allowing it to complete itself. The difference was imperceptible to anyone watching, but to him, it felt like the difference between a locked door and one that had never been closed. What he discovered in that moment wasn't a new technique. It was the removal of interference. All this time, he had believed that success required more effort, more force, more control. But control, he realized, is not the same as mastery. Control is the mind trying to dictate what the body already knows. Mastery is the mind stepping aside and allowing the body to express what it has learned. The techniques he had practiced 10,000 times were already there. They didn't need to be forced into existence. They needed to be allowed to emerge. He began to train differently, not by adding more forms, more repetitions, more complexity, but by removing the layers of tension that stood between intention and action. Before each movement, he would check. Was his breath held? Release it. Were his shoulders tight? Let them drop. Was his mind racing ahead, trying to control the outcome? Bring it back to this moment, this breath, this single action, and then move. Not with force, with precision, not with effort, with economy. The body knows the most efficient path between 2 points. The mind only needs to not obstruct it. Watch a blade cut through bamboo. There's no hesitation in the steel, no second guessing, no internal argument about the proper angle or the correct amount of force. The blade simply follows the line it was designed to follow, and the bamboo falls. This is not about strength. A dull blade, no matter how much force is behind it, will struggle. A sharp blade, guided by a calm hand, cuts clean. The student began to understand that his mind had been the dull blade, not because it lacked knowledge, but because it was cluttered with too much interference. In modern language, we might call this overthinking, but it's more specific than that. It's the phenomenon of internal resistance. Your body tenses before a difficult conversation because your mind is already fighting the outcome. Your fingers freeze on the keyboard because your thoughts are editing before the words have formed. Your presentation stumbles because you're monitoring yourself while trying to perform. This is the mind divided against itself. One part trying to act, the other part trying to control the action. And in that division, flow becomes impossible. The ancient masters understood this. They taught that the obstacle to action is not external. It's the layer of tension we bring to the action itself. When you try to force sleep, sleep evades you. When you try to force creativity, creativity dies. When you try to force your body to perform, it locks. Not because you lack ability, but because trying itself creates resistance. The student found himself returning to a simple practice. Before acting, he would pause, not to prepare, not to strategize, but to notice. Where was he holding tension he didn't need? Where was his breath restricted? Where was his mind already fighting against what hadn't happened yet? And in noticing, the tension would release, not through force, through awareness. You can't force yourself to relax, but you can notice where you're tense, and in that noticing, tension often dissolves on its own. This is the Lee method, not force. Flow, not addition. Subtraction, not controlling the body. Removing what prevents the body from expressing what it already knows. There's a reason this works. The nervous system operates in 2 modes. One activates for threat, fight or flight. Everything tightens, breathing shallows, vision narrows. The other activates for presence, rest and digest. Everything opens, breathing deepens, awareness expands. When you approach a task with force, with grinding determination, with the belief that you must fight through resistance, your nervous system interprets this as threat, and it responds accordingly. Your muscles tighten, your breath restricts, your mind narrows. This is not optimal for performance. It's optimal for survival. But most of what we're trying to do doesn't require survival mode. It requires precision, clarity, the ability to access what we've already learned. And that requires the other state, the one where the body is alert but not tense, where the mind is focused but not rigid, where action flows from readiness, not from force. The student's performances changed, not because he suddenly gained new skills, but because the skills he already had were no longer blocked by his own interference. His movements became clean, efficient, precise, not through effort, through the removal of unnecessary effort. Where he once used 10 muscles to accomplish what required 3, he now used 3. Where he once used 10 thoughts to accomplish what required 1, he now used 1. This is what economy of action looks like. Not minimal effort, optimal effort. The exact amount required. No more, no less. You can feel this in your own body right now. Notice your shoulders. Are they tense? You don't need to force them to relax. Just notice. And often, in the noticing, they'll drop on their own. Notice your breath. Is it shallow Held high in your chest? You don't need to force it deeper, just notice. And often, it will deepen naturally. This is the principle. Awareness precedes change. Force prevents it. When you sit before that screen again, fingers above the keyboard, deadline pressing, you have a choice. You can approach it the old way. Force the words. Grip the outcome. Fight through the resistance. Or you can approach it differently. Notice where you're holding tension you don't need. Let your breath settle. Bring your attention to this moment, this word, this single keystroke, and then act. Not from force, from readiness. The words are already there. The solution is already there. Your job isn't to force it into existence. It's to remove what's preventing it from emerging. The old masters spoke in metaphor because some truths can't be captured in instruction. Be like water. Water doesn't try to be water. It simply is. It adapts to whatever container it finds itself in, yet never loses its essential nature. When you try to grasp it, it slips through your fingers. When you stop trying to hold it, it fills your hands. This is the paradox at the heart of the Lee method. The harder you try, the further you drift. The more you release, the more you discover was already there. There's a stillness that exists beneath action. Not the stillness of inaction. The stillness of perfect readiness. Like a blade at rest, sharp and clean, waiting for the moment to cut. Not eager, not hesitant. Simply ready. When that moment comes, the blade doesn't deliberate. It moves. And the movement is complete before the mind can question it. This is the quality of action the student discovered. Not slow, not fast, timeless. The movement and the moment meeting exactly where they were always meant to. And you? You already know this. Your body has moved without thought 1,000 times. Caught something falling before your mind registered it was falling. Stepped aside from danger before you consciously recognized the threat. Spoken words that arrived fully formed without conscious assembly. The capacity is already there. The Lee method doesn't teach you something new. It removes what's preventing you from accessing what you already are. The student never became famous. There were no crowds, no accolades, but those who practiced with him noticed something had changed. He moved differently, not with the rigid precision of someone following a memorized form, with the fluid certainty of someone who had stopped fighting themselves. His presence in the training hall was different too. Calmer, steadier, not because he had gained something, but because he had released something. The burden of trying to force outcomes he couldn't control. The tension of believing that success required grinding effort. The exhausting grip of a mind that refused to trust what the body already knew. There's a quality of action that emerges when interference dissolves. It doesn't look like effort. It looks like ease. But it's not passive. It's precise. It's the difference between a river carving through stone over centuries and a hammer trying to break it in one blow. The river doesn't try harder. It simply continues. And the stone yields. This is what the Lee method offers. Not a technique to master, attention to release, not a new way to move, permission to stop moving in ways that no longer serve you. The instructions you've been giving yourself, the ways you've been trying to force outcomes, the tension you've been carrying as if it were necessary. Most of it isn't. And when you let it go, what remains is sharper than anything force could create. The screen is still in front of you. The deadline hasn't changed, but something in you has shifted. Your breath is lower, fuller. Your shoulders have dropped without you commanding them to, and your fingers, which were frozen, begin to move. Not because you forced them, because you stopped preventing them. The words come. Not perfect, but real. And you realize you were never blocked. You were simply standing in your own way. This is the method, not a secret, a remembering. The body already knows how to move. The mind already knows how to solve. Your only task is to remove what interferes. Let the blade be sharp. Let the water flow. Let the breath settle. And then, without force, without the grinding determination that has exhausted you for so long, act clean, precise, complete. The Lee method, not force. Flow.